Well, good morning. How are you, Tricia? Good to see you all this morning. We are in Judges chapter 9, one of the longest chapters in the book of Judges, and it's entirely concerned with Abimelech, a son of Gideon, or Jerubbaal, and he is an evil man. Interestingly enough, we are right around 1130 BC, and within 90 years, about 1040 we think, Saul will be coronated as king. So we're only a couple of generations before a legitimate king comes on the scene. Of course, Abimelech is crowned king. It's a little unclear how far his kingdom goes. It's obviously larger than just the city of Shechem. This chapter is a little bit of a unique one in the book of Judges because so much of Judges has to do with the people rebelling, then repenting, and then God saving them, delivering them. In this chapter, there's no redemption. It's just retribution. And so it's a little bit of a dark chapter. It's probably not the darkest in the book of Judges, but it's on the dark side. It demonstrates, I think, how much like the Canaanites the Israelites become. It's hard to differentiate them from Canaanites, the way that they behave as it appears in this chapter. Before I jump into Judges 9 here, I'd like to read a little bit with you from the book of Proverbs, because I think Judges 9 is a great example of what Solomon warns against. So if you wouldn't mind turning over to Proverbs 1 and verse 10, I just want to read a little section here with you. I didn't think of this early enough to put it up on the slide, or I'd have the text up there for you. Proverbs 1, verse 10, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious goods. We will fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us. We will have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird." In other words, the bird will see it and flee. "But these men," verse 18, "lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors." That was the ESV, by the way. And that, I think, is a great description of what goes on in this chapter. You go down the path of wickedness and evil and violence, and you set a trap for yourself. You take your own life. And we won't get to the end of the chapter today, but that's where this chapter ends, is with the quick and ugly death of Abimelech himself. Maybe you remember, if you weren't here last week, one of the things that helped launch Abimelech's career was his hiring evil men and going and killing his 70 brothers, also descendants of Gideon. So he begins with violence and bloodshed, and he ends that way. So today I want to look at the middle third of this chapter, beginning with verse 26. Abimelech is king of Shechem, but he's not living in Shechem. That might seem a little odd to us. Apparently his territory is larger than that. We will run into the fact here that he actually lives in a neighboring town called Aruma, and that's, for whatever reason, that's his throne, but he rules over Shechem. I should maybe just tell you here, I'm not going to go through, read with you what's on the back of your handout, but I'll tell you what it does. It draws a parallel between what we see here with Abimelech and Shechem and what we know from extra-biblical sources, the Amarna letters, from about 2 centuries earlier. And it's very, very similar. And I think you can probably conclude that many of the people in this chapter, these native Shechemites, are descendants of the ones a couple centuries earlier. The little clay tablet here is one of the Amarna tablets, correspondence between the king up here and the Pharaoh down in Egypt, and it's in Akkadian. That was their English of the day. And since you don't read that, probably, if you do, I'd like to talk with you. I gave you a translation. I don't read it either, so I had to get the translation from somebody else. But you can read that. You might want to take a look from time to time at the map that's on the back there. So let me jump in here. Judges chapter 9, verse 26. The Shechemites, by the way, just prior to this, had kind of been in revolt against Abimelech. They'd been robbing passerby, caravans, and just ordinary people, making a nuisance of themselves. So we jump into verse 26. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his relatives and crossed over into Shechem. And the men of Shechem put their trust in him. And they went out into the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards and trod them and held a festival. And they went into the house of their God and ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. That's their king. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is Zebul not his lieutenant? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? Would therefore that this people were under my authority, then I would remove Abimelech." And he said to Abimelech, and I would assume this is in absentia, "Increase your army and come out." You can almost see him pointing in the direction of Aruma and hollering as though it were Abimelech listening. "Put your army together and let's duke things out." And we happen to have a photo of Gaal, and this is he. No, I just wanted something that looked kind of young and no, it's not David. Oh, now you've ruined it. Young and reckless and full of himself. It's interesting that he comes to Shechem. He apparently had been living elsewhere, but he crosses over to Shechem and says, "I'll be your king. Let me rule. Why are you serving Abimelech?" We don't know where he came from, but the the rulers, right there in verse 26, the rulers of Shechem put their trust in him. They accepted him. You might wonder, why is it, and this kind of ties in with your handout, why is it that the Shechemites don't just appoint one of their own? Why is it that they accept an outsider as king? Of course, this Amarna letter describes the exact same situation. The guy that's writing the letter does not live in Shechem, but Shechem is under his rule. And I think it probably has to do with the geography of the place. It's an important city because it's located on a crossroads, but it's a difficult city to defend. It's not up on a tall hill or in an isolated place or that kind of thing. And so it sort of makes sense that you would coordinate yourself with and hopefully get protection from outsiders. And to have a king that is located elsewhere kind of does that for you. That seems to be what's going on with Abimelech, and that seems to have quite a bit of history with this particular city. So the text tells us that it is grape season. Maybe you can make out the grapevine here. This is from relief from Nineveh, but it's about the conquest of Judea. And grapes don't grow well in Nineveh, but they do in this foreign place. And so there's all kinds of grape clusters hanging on there. There's also fig trees on either side, not as easily seen, but grapes are still a common crop in Israel today. Grapes of all sorts. This is an ancient 14th century BC artistic work of glass or glass-like material that's supposed to look like a cluster of grapes. I think it looks kind of delicious. An old relief that shows a Gaal in front of a table that's piled high with food, and among that you can make out clusters of grapes. At first glance, those might look to you and I like corn, right? An ear of maize. They didn't have that. That's a America thing that did not. So in your King James Bible, when you read about corn, they're using that term generically for grain. It's not maize. They didn't have maize. So these are clusters of grapes. The typical process that they went through, you can see it all here. Guys that are actually pulling the fruit from the vines, which are on, they're up off the ground. They've got baskets full of grapes. They carry them over, dump them. You can see the guy dumping here. Dump them into a wine press, and a bunch of men walk on them. They don't want to break the pips, the little seeds, because those are bitter, but they crush the rest of the grape, and the juice flows out. And they didn't have room below, so they put it up above, the grape juice being dumped into jars, and it will turn into wine in fairly short order. Yes, I do have a few. This is an actual wine press, a guy dumping wine into it. You get enough of them. I've never raised enough grapes to do something like this. In fact, I've never gotten more than 3 or 4 berries. I'm a horrible grape raiser, but the flavor of the wine is directly correlated to who it is that does the wine pressing. But eventually they drain the juice out of there and store it. So that's what these guys do, and they declare a festival, verse 27, a party at the temple of their god, and that's where Gaal comes and expresses his dissatisfaction with Abimelech. He wants to be the guy in charge, and he even points a finger at this guy Zebul. This is an interesting, see, I got a picture of him too. A little more, has a little more presence than Gaal. He's the lieutenant and apparently in charge of the city, a local that stayed in Shechem that worked on behalf of Abimelech, overseeing, directing, coordinating, ruling locally. And Gaal kind of fingers him and says, you know, he's part of your problem, guys. Did you pick up, let me put my finger on the verse here, verse 28, halfway down, is not Zebul his lieutenant? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But why should you serve him? Well, this is kind of interesting. Gaal apparently is claiming descent from Hamor. Now, when Abimelech came in to convince these guys to make him king, one of his arguments was, I'm a Shechemite. I'm a descendant of Shechem. It was through his mother. Gaal tries to one-up him. We're going back before Shechem. We're going to his father, Hamor. I don't know if those two names ring a bell to you, but they appear in the Genesis account when Jacob and his sons camp outside of Shechem. So this is hundreds of years earlier. And their sister, Dinah, was raped by Shechem, the man named Shechem. And then the brothers got upset and said, okay, they deceptively made an agreement with the Shechemites, and the father of Shechem is specifically listed there as Hamor. And they said to him, okay, y'all be circumcised, and then we'll share stuff. We'll let this marriage go through. And the text says Hamor went back to the city leaders and said, I mean, how do you talk a city into doing this? And he said, you know what? If we do this, all of their stuff, Jacob and his sons, is ours. And apparently, Jacob and his sons had significant livestock. And so there was some incentive in there. Again, this happens much, much earlier. It's a little uncertain. Are those the only two guys ever named Hamor and Shechem? Or were these more dynastic names? That's common in the ancient Near East, dynastic names, the same name used over and over again in a dynasty. It could be that they're referring back to these two guys that lived there in the days of Jacob. It could be that they're names that were commonly used by rulers at Shechem. It's a little hard to tell. And I don't know that it really makes any difference. Just interesting, I think, that those two names are used again. Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting connection. So let's jump into verse 30 here. Then when Zebul, the ruler, and it's a Hebrew word, shar. It's often like prince or something. It's different than king, but he's a lieutenant or something like that here. The ruler of the city heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed. His anger burned. And he sent messengers to Abimelech deceitfully, saying, well, before I go into what he said, let me pause just a second. What does deceitfully mean? Well, at first blush, I thought he's trying to deceive Abimelech. But when you read further down, he's actually helping Abimelech figure out a way to get rid of Gaal. So I think probably a better word here than deceitfully would be like surreptitiously. He did this on the sly. He's not trying to deceive Abimelech. He's helping Abimelech. We'll see that. But he can't let Gaal know what he's doing because he's trying to fool Gaal. You could stick with a word like deceitfully if you understand it's not Abimelech that's being deceived, but it's Gaal that's being deceived. Okay, so here's what he said in verse 31. Behold, Gaal the son of Ebed and his relatives have come to Shechem, and behold, they're stirring up the city against you. Now therefore, arise by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it will come about in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, that you will rise early and rush upon the city. And behold, when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you shall do to them whatever you can. So he alerts Abimelech to the issue and gives him a provisional plan for how to deal with it. It's just amazing to me the amount of deceit and violence that's interwoven through all of this. It's the fabric on which this entire story is built. And here we see it again. Okay. Get my the fields of Shechem. My New American Standard here had field. Obviously, it's the outlying area.
In this narrative, it seems like Abimelech has to have a high trust level in Gaal to fix this plan.
You mean Zebul? Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. A double cross. Yes. So it seems like Abimelech had to have had a high trust level in Zebul. So that's a great point, and it brings up a fascinating question. What actually is going on here? Is Zebul helping Abimelech, or is he playing his own game? And I wondered myself, I kind of tried to play that out. Once Shechem is destroyed, Zebul kind of disappears. We don't hear any more about him. I think the question is, it could be, once the city's destroyed, there's no longer any need for a governor or a lieutenant. He just melds into the rest of the army, which is short-lived anyway. But it did cross my mind, Zebul could be planning for his own insurrection here. But Abimelech does seem to trust him. And he does what Zebul says. And at least initially, Zebul, at a minimum, you can say he's working against Gaal. Is he working for Abimelech? Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah. It's a great question, Bill. I wish I knew a little more about that, but mm-hmm. Yeah. Who's actually a friend of who? And sometimes it is a case of actually working together in a friendly way, and then somebody flips. Uh-huh. Yep. It's human nature. So we've got Ebal in this photo right here. Then we've got this little valley, and Gerizim is on the other side, and Shechem is right about here. So and it's a long, narrow valley to the west. So that's not where their fields were. Modern day, that long, narrow valley is filled with the Palestinian city of Nablus. You maybe hear about that every once in a while on the news. But the major fields are off to the east. You can see some olive trees growing here. Obviously, they had grapevines and probably cereal grains and that kind of thing. The tactical point of this is that in the morning, if the guys from the city come out to their fields in the east, they're looking into the sun. And that helps if it's still early morning, the sun has just come up. It's a little hard to see into that. It's as much advantage as you're going to get. And so that's what Zabul suggests for Gideon. Into verse 33, do whatever you can. Verse 34, so Abimelech and all the people who were with him arose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance of the city gate, and Abimelech and the people who were with him arose from ambush. And I'm going to pause there just a moment. This is, oops, I keep forgetting. This is, you can see kind of, if I can move correctly, the circle of the ancient city, something like this. This is the temple of Berith, Baal Berith. We read about that a couple of times already. The massive standing stone and its associated tree where Abimelech was made king. Some massive, I know you can't really tell that in this aerial photo, but a massive middle bronze city wall here. Is it still standing 30 feet high? It's huge. There is a gate toward the west right over here, but the gate we're talking about, Iron Age houses, the east gate is over here. And I want to show you a couple of pictures of that because that's almost certainly the place where this particular part of the story takes place. They go out and stand in the city gate. And this is it. You can tell it's got a chamber on either side. There are some huge sets of stones here where the actual doors would have been, so probably 2 sets of doors. If I'm correct, these were constructed in the Middle Bronze, which is while the Israelites were down in Egypt, and were still in use now in the Late Bronze Age because they were so strong and had not been torn down or replaced. So we're looking east. This is the inside of the city. You walk up this little set of stairs through this massive gateway and out, and then the fields off to the east are out here, covered today by buildings, but a couple more pictures of that. Different time of year when there's less greenery around, but you can kind of make out now that you know what it is, the gateway there. More from ground level, this is, you can see the threshold. Part of the city wall off on the outside, and I just wanted to point out to you, I mean, here's some people. Look at the massive size of these stones. They're just huge. So there were impressive defenses around this city, and you can see these half a dozen people walking through this gateway. Sorry, spider. One less spider. Massive gateway. Here's a photo of the city wall on the west side, and it would have been something similar, I'm sure, on the east side. So they go out and stand in that city gate. Verse 35. Abimelech, in the middle of the verse, Abimelech and the people who were with him arose from the ambush. So they got up to charge. When Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Zebul said to him, "You're seeing the shadow of the mountains as if they were men." And Gaal spoke again and said, "Behold, people are coming down from the highest parts of the land, and one company comes by the way of the diviner's oak." Then Zebul said to him, "Where is your boasting now, with which you said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should serve him?' Is this not the people whom you despised? Go out now and fight with them." So Gaal went out before the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded up to the city gate. Then Abimelech remained at Arumah, but Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives, so they could not remain in Shechem. So Gaal had his chance, and he was chased off. Apparently not killed, but he was chased off. People that were returning were wounded. It doesn't state that any were killed, but even as they came up to the city gate, and my suspicion would be that at this point Zebul makes some differentiation between who gets back in and who is excluded. If you're Gaal or one of his supporters, you're kept out. But if you're loyal to Zebul and to Abimelech, you're allowed in. Just a, I think, interesting little connection here. This is another letter from Amarna, from Abdi-Hepah, the king of Jerusalem, to the king of Egypt. This is in the middle of his text, but not a single mayor, that's like a ruler like Zebul, of a city remains. Turbazu and Yaptihada were slain in the city gate of Silu, which we think is modern, biblical Shiloh. So just another connection with battle at the city gate. And this will come back again at the end of the chapter when Abimelech dies. He's attempting to take the city gate. It's a letter. It's a piece of clay, and written in the English of the day, the trade language. It's Akkadian. It's a cuneiform wedge-shaped thing. So it's a piece of clay, and the scribe, as the ruler of Jerusalem, Abdi-Hepah, would dictate. The scribe would write down what he wanted to say, and then they would send it down to the king of Egypt. Often they asked for, send us more troops. We are being loyal. Other people are attacking us. Two sides, front and back. And it's not uncommon that the back is not complete. They stop when the text is done. So, yeah. All these questions about the Amarna letters, we may just have to have a lesson. No, I'll spare you that. They are interesting, though. They're the reign of Akhenaten, the heretic king, the Egyptian king that tried to reduce worship to only the Aten, the sun god, and to do away with all other worship. This is about 1350 BC. And then his son, King Tut. You all know King Tut because Howard Carter found his tomb essentially undisturbed. So glorious things, as Howard Carter said, came out of that tomb. But this is from the reign of either Akhenaten or perhaps his father, Amenhotep III. Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation about that. Why is that, and how do you explain it? Because it's very un-Egyptian-like. But at his death, they reverted back to worshiping all the gods, and an effort was made to wipe out the name of Akhenaten. So they would they would chisel out his name on monuments or pillars or inscriptions or that kind of thing, because he had tried to right, tried to force, I suppose you could say, a version of monotheism on Egypt. Yeah, all kinds of speculation. Does this have something to do with the Exodus and Moses and Yahweh? Of course, Yahweh is not Aten, the sun god, but yeah, it's a fascinating period because Akhenaten did his own thing artistically, or the artists that worked for him. I've talked a little bit about that in here before, but it's just a fascinating period from a bunch of different standpoints. His wife was Nefertiti. Remember the beautiful plaster bust that's in the Berlin Museum? One of the most beautiful pieces of artwork that we have from antiquity. There's a lot of stuff comes from his reign. Abimelech returns to Aruma, which is where he was living and I suppose reigning at the time. So here's Shechem, and here is Aruma. I'll show you a couple of photos from Aruma. It's about 6.5, 7 miles to get from one to the other. So not terribly far away, but far enough away that he wouldn't have a finger directly on the pulse without somebody with him. Let me show you a couple pictures of Aruma. They've done just a little bit of excavation work there. This is the site. It's that little mound hill there in the distance. I always think this doesn't look very impressive from the air. It doesn't look very large, but when you're actually on the ground, it's a significant hilltop site, and it was well defended. It had, it continued to be a city for many, many centuries. I don't know. Sorry, I keep doing that. Too used to the other side. There's a saddle here that connects this hilltop with the one to the south, so that's the weakest part of the tell, and you can see the massive defensive wall that's here and a couple of square towers that help to defend it. Those are from the Hellenistic period, so shortly after Alexander the Great, roughly 200 BC. And I kind of like this drone shot too, because you can actually see the area of Shechem off in the distance. This is Mount Ebal, this is Mount Gerizim, and Shechem is right there. So it's virtually within sight, but several miles away. Wish we knew more about what happens here with Zebul. Like Bill said, this is kind of a curious thing. Is he setting up for himself? Is he just loyal to Abimelech? He disappears from our narrative after this. So I'm gonna call it quits there and just throw up a few points. Evil eats up those who practice it. We see that. We don't know what happens specifically to Zebul, but the men of Shechem were evil. Abimelech was evil. Gaal was evil. His people were evil. What's the result? Do they prosper? No. They are consumed by their own evil. Deceit and treachery are not profitable. And we know that. I mean, if you ask us, yeah, of course they're not profitable. But knowledge and practice are sometimes two different things. There is a temptation to be deceitful in order to profit. It doesn't pay. I mean, sometimes it has some lure and a little quick turnaround time. Yeah, I got some money. But in the end, it's always a loss. And I think this story demonstrates that. Abimelech thought he had a plan to get rich, be powerful. The leaders of Shechem thought they had a plan. Gaal thought he had a plan. All of them involved treachery and deceit and disloyalty and violence and those kinds of things. And it was not good. Humans are sinful. I know this is a really basic point, but if you need a demonstration, I don't know how many people we're talking about here. We'll have about 1,000 killed in the temple of Baal Berith in the next section. There's more than that. That's not everybody. Where's the righteous? The person that stands up and says, let's do this Yahweh's way. There isn't one. Why is that? There's not just one or two bad seeds here. It's everybody, so far as we can tell. I just think it illustrates the human plight. Jeremiah 17, you're familiar with this. Verses 9 and 10, the heart is more deceitful than all else, and it's desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, Yahweh, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give to each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds. And our chapter is going to end that way. God paid back Abimelech and the men of Shechem for their evil. And it will specifically tell us for killing the 70 sons of Gideon. Don't be coerced or lured into evil activity. It doesn't pay good dividends. I know you all know this, but just a reminder, I think that's a major theme of this chapter. Comments, questions? I see that hand.
So it said back in 22, it says Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. So this is God acting in a proactive way, coming down and messing up what Abimelech has.
Putting a stop to that, yeah.
So does God do that because that's his people? That he wants to discipline? Because it seems like he'll let other places just go for years and decades and centuries.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. He does take a particular interest in Israel, a more hands-on approach, if you will, because they are his people. Yeah, you're right. We see in pagan nations, Gentile nations, well, at least we don't have this kind of detail about how God might be at work in those places. But yeah, I mean, these are his people. He has given them direction. He has given them law. He has told them how to live. And he has a special relationship with them. You might recall, too, when in the Mosaic Law, when God gives stipulations for a king, it's the king that he chooses. It's somebody that he, and of course that's what we see with Saul and then eventually with David. It's not just whenever somebody arises that wants to call himself king, this is what he needs to do. Of course, Abimelech doesn't follow any of those parameters at all. But yeah, I think we see God, well, the text will tell us that at the end of this chapter. God intervenes. He brings about the demise of Abimelech and Shechem because of their violent and evil ways. I don't know if I answered your question at all. I talked long enough you forgot.
No. Well, I think he tries to, or he confronts the believer faster than
Yeah. I mean, we see God at work Nebuchadnezzar is kind of a classic pagan king, but God is really involved with him, directing him, disciplining him,
As
things
a
like
tool
that.
to discipline Israel.
Yes, it was for that purpose. Nineveh, the Ninevites, Jonah, that's another example of God working with pagans in the Old Testament as a larger group. But yeah, Israel is his special focus. Okay. Let me close this in prayer then. Lord, thanks for your word and for what you have recorded for us here. These are dark days for Israel. That seems to be pretty obvious, both in your view and in any of your people's view. But there are lessons for us to learn even there. Help us to see and not imitate the actions of guys like Abimelech. Help us instead to be faithful and loyal followers of you. Give us both the courage, the willpower, the urge to do what is right, because we know that's not our natural urge. And I pray that you would grant us wisdom. We have difficult things that we face, and sometimes it's not easy to know how we should act. So we ask for your grace and for your wisdom. Help us as we walk day by day to keep close account with you. Help us to, again, be loyal followers of yours, and grant us your grace. In your name I pray. Amen.